Have you ever wondered, what would it feel like to wake up one morning, step out onto your porch and see black smoke curling up from the spot where your grandfather once drove in the very first nail? I have. And at first, I thought, maybe it was an accident. That was until I saw the purple SUV of the HOA president quietly rolling away from the scene. Until the bank froze my accounts, anonymous letters filled my mailbox, and the entire town turned its back on me because of a doctored video. That's when I understood. I hadn't just lost a cabin. I'd stepped onto a battlefield, where the weapons were HOA bylaws, and the bullets came in the form of signatures behind closed doors. But what they didn't know was, I was the guy who approved their funding, and in this game of power, they burned the wrong man. My name is Logan Barrett, former Marine, a man of his word, and grandson to the man who laid the first beams of what would become Red Pine Retreat, a family-built getaway carved out by sweat, grit, and calloused hands. That morning, I'd barely taken my first sip of coffee when the phone rang. Logan. It's the cabin. It's on fire. The whole East Row is burning. It was Olivia, my trusted neighbor and closest friend in the area. I didn't even have time to set the mug down. It slipped from my hand and shattered on the porch, like my heart did in that moment. From my front yard, I could see black smoke billowing from the tree line near Lake Pinebrush. That column of smoke wasn't just a sign of flames. It was a warning shot. The fire had started at the heart of the retreat, right where my grandfather built the very first cabin with scarred hands after returning from war, and through that smoke, I saw it. A loud, unmistakable purple SUV creeping away from the gravel lot near the blaze. I knew that car well. The license plate read Brenzy 1, belonging to Brenda Whitmore, president of the HOA across the lake. The same woman I'd just yesterday refused to sell my land to. I said no. A short word. But to Brenda, it may as well have been a declaration of war. And her retaliation? Burn down everything I swore to protect. 3 years ago, I inherited Red Pine from my grandfather after he passed. At the time, it was just 5 aging log cabins tucked among the pines, looking out over a still lake. I'd renovated and expanded it, adding 7 more cabins, each crafted in his rustic style but with modern comfort, natural stone fireplaces, stargazing tubs, the works. Guests came from 3 neighboring states. They called it a hidden paradise. But the issue was, Red Pine sat just outside the boundary of Hickory Ridge Estates, a luxury housing development run by Brenda with a velvet glove iron fist. I'd heard the rumors that she weaponized the HOA, crushed dissent with violation notices, and bent every rule in her favor. I thought I'd be the exception. I was wrong. That Tuesday, the weather was beautiful. And that was the day Brenda first rolled her purple SUV into the gravel lot in front of my outdoor cafe. She stepped out dressed like she was headed to an 80s costume party, neon floral dress, screaming orange heels, and a necklace that shimmered in the sun. Trailing behind was Terry Beck, the HOA vice president, sweating bullets and clutching a tablet like it was a defibrillator. "Mr. Barrett," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I'm Brenda Whitmore, president of Hickory Ridge HOA." Her handshake? Limp and damp. We sat on the porch drinking iced tea. She talked about her vision for community integration, pitched a shared recreation center for residents, and offered to buy Red Pine for double market value. I almost considered it, until I caught a glimpse of a design plan slipping from Terry's briefcase. Not a rec center at all, but a 3-story private villa with a personal marina and a glass-walled spa facing Lake Pinebrush. I set the tea down. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not selling. It's a promise I made to my grandfather." Brenda's smile tightened. Her charm bracelets clinked like warning bells. "Mr. Barrett, perhaps you don't understand. We already own all the land surrounding Red Pine. You're the final piece. And if you won't cooperate, you'll regret it." I just nodded. Slowly. Nothing more needed to be said. And today, exactly 1 day after that refusal, Red Pine burned. I stood there, frozen. The scent of burning timber filled my lungs. The sirens in the distance couldn't drown out the roar of the flames. I thought of what my grandfather once told me. You can rebuild a cabin, but if you lose your honor, it's gone forever. Don't know what Brenda's next move is, but if she thought torching my property would make me kneel, she picked the wrong man to threaten. By the time the fire trucks finally made it up the winding road to Red Pine, 3 cabins were already gone. The eastern ridge looked like a war zone. Charred beams stood like broken ribs clawing at the smoke-stained sky. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stood there, shirt soaked in sweat and ash, watching the legacy my grandfather built collapse into embers. One of the firemen, a young guy with haunted eyes, approached me. "Mr. Barrett, we've contained it on the north side, but I'm afraid the rest is a total loss." I nodded, still silent. But inside, something cracked. This wasn't just a fire. This was a message. The next morning, I drove straight to town. Needed air. Coffee. A place where the smell of smoke didn't claw at the back of my throat. I parked. Outside the only open diner in Hickory Ridge, and as I stepped out of my truck, there it was again. That same purple SUV, Brenda Whitmore. She was seated outside, sunglasses on, sipping something cold through a straw like she didn't have a care in the damn world. When she saw me, she smiled, like a python noticing a wounded mouse. "Logan," she said, overly sweet, "I heard about your unfortunate fire. Such a tragedy. Electrical, maybe?" I didn't answer. I just stared. And that smile of hers? It slipped for half a second. Just long enough to show what was underneath. Hunger. She wanted my land. And now, with my cabins gone, she thought I was weak. I left without a word. But what she didn't know? I wasn't just a former Marine who inherited some cabins. By day, I'm also a senior financial analyst for Cumberland County Infrastructure Fund, the group responsible for auditing and approving municipal budgets and community investment grants, including HOA development funds. 2 days after the fire, I got a new file on my desk, a scheduled review of Hickory Ridge HOA's financial practices. My hand actually shook. This wasn't just personal anymore. I was being handed the chance, the power, to investigate her in the books. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, I opened the file and started digging. Within an hour, red flags were popping up like wildfire. A $72,000 landscaping invoice paid to a company with no website and a P.O. box address. $38,000 for security consultation paid to a firm registered in a different state linked to Brenda's cousin. And then the kicker. A $15,000 transfer labeled PR cleanup dated just 2 days before the fire. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I knew what that meant, and I knew what I had to do. Back at Red Pine, things were getting worse. Brenda's crew, or whoever she hired, had plastered fake hazard signs across my gates. Unstable terrain. Closed for code violations. Environmental risk. Guests who still had reservations turned around before even entering. The drive. Deliveries were being rerouted. Google search results for Red Pine were flooded with fake reviews. Unsafe. Rodent infestation. No power, no water. And every day, like clockwork, I got a new HOA violation notice in the mail. Despite the fact that my land didn't even fall under their jurisdiction, 2 tall trees, unauthorized fencing, unapproved paint color, and the most insulting, mailbox. Improperly aligned with community aesthetic. I use a P.O. box, damn it. That's when I decided to pay Brenda a visit, on her turf. The Hickory Ridge HOA headquarters looked like something out of a bad Southern soap opera. White columns, American flag, heritage banners flapping in the breeze. I stepped into the ice-cold lobby and walked straight to her office. She was there, of course, surrounded by marble countertops and a chandelier that probably cost more than my truck. "Mr. Barrett," she said, feigning surprise. "Back so soon?" I placed the county boundary maps and deed copies on her desk. "You have no legal authority over Red Pine," I said. "Any more notices, and I'll consider it harassment." She barely looked at the papers. "These maps are outdated," she snapped. "Our board has voted to incorporate your land into Hickory Ridge. We're expanding. You don't get to redraw county lines, Brenda. She stood, bracelets clanging like warning bells. We do what's necessary to maintain property values. Your backwoods shantytown isn't welcome here. That shantytown won 3 regional ecotourism awards, I said evenly, and it's been here 30 years longer than your cookie-cutter McMansions. She lost it. You'll regret this, Barrett. I'll make sure of it. You think you're clever? I built this community. As I walked out, I could feel her eyes on my back, burning holes like the fire she started. That night, a message showed up on my phone from an unknown number. Be careful. Brenda doesn't play fair. She forced the Hendersons out last summer. Same tricks. Another one followed. She's got friends at the bank, county office too. You're on your own. But I wasn't alone. A knock on my door came around 9 p.m. It was Olivia Walker, my neighbor and one of the few Hickory Ridge residents with a backbone. She's holding an emergency HOA meeting, she whispered. I overheard her. Brenda said she's going to break you, make you beg to sell. We sat on the cabin porch drinking bourbon and watching the moonlight ripple across Pine Brush Lake. I told her about the financial irregularities, showed her the documents, and for the first time in days I saw something in her face that matched what I felt in my gut, righteous fury. Be careful, she said. She's not just corrupt, she's connected. I nodded, because I knew what came next. Wouldn't be legal, it would be war. I've seen sabotage before, overseas, in combat zones. But nothing prepared me for the quiet, bureaucratic warfare of a corrupt HOA hell-bent on destroying everything I loved. 2 days after that bourbon-soaked night on the porch with Olivia, I woke up to a low mechanical rumble. Not thunder, not trucks passing by. I threw on my boots and stepped outside, and what I saw stopped me cold. Every road into Red Pine was blocked. Bulldozers, cement trucks, temporary fencing and construction signs planted right at the edges of my property. Bright orange boards read, "Environmental hazard, no entry." They weren't warning signs, they were walls. When I approached the foreman, a guy named Rob with a crooked helmet and a nervous glance, he barely looked at me. Just following orders, he muttered. Permit came through yesterday. Emergency repair work. Emergency. Where? I snapped. There's no infrastructure here, he shrugged. Talk to the county. I already knew who I'd be talking to. Brenda Whitmore's friends at the county office. That afternoon, the real damage started. Phone calls from guests canceling their bookings. A few cited safety concerns. One said they saw online that read, Pine was under fire code investigation. I checked the listings. My resort was being bombed with fake reviews. Unsafe. Unclean. Fire hazards everywhere. Rodents in the cabins. Dozens of them. All posted within a single day. All from usernames like Ho Champion 21 or Beaver Creek Local. They weren't subtle, but they didn't have to be. They were effective. Then came the financial ambush, a call from my bank. Mr. Barrett, your business account has been temporarily frozen, the manager said, her voice laced with fake sympathy. We've received reports of financial irregularities. Routine investigation. No details, no transparency, just enough disruption to stop me from paying my team. My maintenance crew quit. My assistant manager packed her things with tears in her eyes. I didn't blame them. Brenda was slowly starving Red Pine to death. That night, I dug deep into HOA records I'd been quietly collecting, and what I found confirmed what I feared. 2 companies had received over $100,000 from Hickory Ridge HOA in the past year, Elite Security Consulting and Premier Landscape Design. Both were shells. No websites, no physical offices, just P.O. boxes and a trail of tax filings that led straight to Ethan Whitmore, Brenda's nephew. But one transaction chilled my blood. $15,000 wired to a company called Specialized Demolition Services. Memo. PR Cleanup. PR. Pine Ridge. Red Pine. Me. I didn't need confirmation. I needed action. That's when my phone rang. A woman's voice. Nervous. Quiet. Is this Logan Barrett? Yeah, my name is Harper Whitmore, Brenda's daughter. We need to talk, in private. We met at a corner cafe outside Hickory Ridge. Dim, lights, neutral ground. Harper showed up late, no makeup, worn denim jacket. She looked nothing like the HOA tyrant that raised her. She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were architectural plans, not for a community center like Brenda had claimed, but for a massive private estate, complete with boat, dock, infinity pool, and a spa overlooking Pinebrush Lake. The construction was set for my land. I found these on her computer, Harper whispered. She's using HOA funds to build a personal compound. The property will be transferred to a trust in her name once the sale goes through. Why are you showing me this? I asked. She stared into her coffee. Because I've seen her do this before. 3 times, same tactics, same pressure, and she ruined lives every time. I can't let it happen again. That night, I returned to Red Pine to find Brenda and Terry walking the grounds with measuring tape and a camera. On my land, I stepped out from the shadows. You're trespassing. Brenda turned, that smug look never leaving her face. Your time here is almost up, Barrett, she said. Smart men know when they've lost. I didn't move. She stepped closer, perfume choking the air between us. Then, she threw her water bottle at my face, soaking my shirt. Terry, of course, had his phone up, recording the moment I stepped forward, angry and dripping. But only after the bottle hit. No footage of the trespass, just my reaction. The next morning, that video hit social media. Headline, Local resort owner threatens HOA president. No context, just a 15-second clip of me looking furious. My phone exploded with angry messages. Local businesses started to distance themselves, but I didn't care because I wasn't here to win a popularity contest. I was here to expose a fraud, and after that night, I had all the ammunition I needed. The night after the video dropped, I didn't sleep. I sat in my truck at the edge of Red Pine, staring out over the scorched earth where the cabins once stood, thinking of all the families who had stayed here, laughing, hiking, fishing before Brenda Whitmore decided to burn it all down, literally and figuratively. But you see, that's the thing about people like her. They think intimidation is a strategy. They think silence means surrender. But silence from a man like me? It means I'm planning something they won't see coming. First, I called Deputy Marshal Franklin Morrison, one of the few officers in Beaver County who hadn't sold his soul to Brenda's charm or her campaign donations. I invited him to Red Pine the next morning. Showed him everything. The fake environmental signs, the construction blockades, the vandalism, the edited video, the harassment notices. Then I handed him something he didn't expect. A flash drive. Here's every HOA transaction I've traced back to Brenda's family, I said. Fake contractors, shell companies, embezzlement, all tied to Hickory Ridge's general fund. He looked at the files, then back at me. This is enough to freeze their accounts, he said. Maybe more. But it won't stick unless we go federal, I replied. That's where I come in. I returned to the office of William Prescott, Executive Director of the Cumberland County Infrastructure Fund, my boss. I'd been waiting for the right moment to bring him into this. Now was that moment. When I entered, I looked like hell. Bloodshot eyes. 5-day beard, shirt still smelling faintly of smoke. Logan, William said, standing up. I've been hearing things. The fire, the video, the bank freeze. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. If you're willing to hear what I've found. And so I laid it all out. Brenda's fake community center pitch, the secret mansion plans, the financial trail through bogus companies, the fire, and Harper Whitmore's warning that there would be another. William didn't say a word for nearly a full minute after I finished. Then he exhaled slowly and sat down. Logan, as your superior, I should reprimand you for not disclosing a conflict of interest. You own land directly affected by an HOA we fund. I waited, but, he continued, as someone who's known you for 5 years, I believe you. And I want you to handle this. What does that mean? You'll lead a full forensic audit of Hickory Ridge's HOA, starting now. All funding is suspended, and I'm assigning our legal and compliance teams to work under you. Burn them down, Barrett, but do it by the book. I'd never heard better words in my life. That afternoon, I attended a public HOA meeting in Hickory Ridge, seated in the back row like a ghost coming to haunt Brenda's parade. She walked in, wearing another blinding floral disaster of a dress, sunglasses perched like a tiara, and an attitude that screamed untouchable. She started the meeting with forced enthusiasm. We're thrilled to announce that preliminary work on the new community center has begun thanks to cooperative real estate changes in the area. I hit a record on my phone. Exactly 47 minutes later, she received a courier envelope, official notice from Cumberland County. All Hickory Ridge HOA funding is frozen pending investigation into financial misconduct and fraud. Her face paled. She stood, fumbled for control, blamed her assistant, then turned on Terry Beck with claws drawn. But Terry had had enough. He stood, visibly shaking. "No more lies, Brenda," he said. "The money's gone. You funneled it to your family's businesses, and this whole vendetta against Logan. It's not for the community, it's personal." The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, homeowners whispering in disbelief. I stood up and walked out before Brenda could turn the crowd against him. Sometimes the best move is to let them devour their own queen. Back at the audit office, I had help now. William's legal team dug through bank records, property transfers, emails. The deputy marshal pulled permits and construction orders, most of them signed under duress or expedited with bribes. And then came the smoking gun, a string of text messages between Brenda and two known arsonists for hire. Messages that said things like, "Use an accelerant this time. Make sure nothing is salvageable. Offer him half value after." They were enough to secure an arrest warrant. But the final nail came from the very woman Brenda had underestimated the most, her own daughter. Harper contacted me again. We met at a quiet park bench overlooking the lake, the same lake Brenda wanted private access to. "I found more," she said. "Recordings. She thought she deleted them. I backed them up, months ago." She handed me a second flash drive, and on it, audio of Brenda commanding the fires, naming me, planning it all. That night, I called William. "It's time," I said. We arranged for a special hearing at the Beaver Creek Town Hall, attended by county officials, HOA board members, homeowners, and the press. I took the stand, introduced myself as Senior Financial Advisor, Cumberland County Fund, and then laid it out. Every document, transaction, photo, witness statement, message, an audio clip. Brenda tried to interrupt. The chair silenced her. Then came the video evidence, captured from hidden security cameras I'd installed weeks ago at the advice of Deputy Morrison. Footage of Brenda and two men pouring accelerant around my grandfather's original cabin. Her voice crystal clear. "Burn it all. I want him on his knees." The room erupted, and just like that, the mask cracked completely. Brenda lunged for the evidence table and had to be restrained by deputies. The panel returned 20 minutes later with a verdict. Hickory Ridge HOA's funding is revoked. Its charter was suspended, and Brenda Whitmore is hereby arrested for embezzlement, conspiracy, and arson. As the deputies cuffed her, she snarled at me, "This isn't over." I didn't flinch. "No, Brenda," I said. "Now it finally is. They say revenge is best served cold. But I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. What I wanted, what I needed, was rebirth." After Brenda Whitmore was cuffed and dragged out of that town hall with her designer bracelets replaced by steel ones, there wasn't a cheer in the room. No applause, just silence. The stunned silence of a community realizing they'd been manipulated, used, and nearly ruined. And me? I just stood there, watching. Not smug, not triumphant, just relieved. The war was over, but the rebuilding, that was just the beginning. 3 days later, I returned to Red Pine. The land was still scorched. Ash still clung to the charred foundation beams like soot on a memory. But it felt different. Brenda was gone. Her network dismantled. Her accounts frozen. Her power evaporated. Deputy Morrison stood next to me, arms crossed, surveying the blackened remains of what once was my family's legacy. "You really gonna rebuild all this?" he asked, kicking at a melted piece of siding. I looked out at the lake, where my grandfather used to take me fishing. "I'm not just gonna rebuild," I said. "I'm going to expand, and this time I'm gonna make damn sure no one can take it away." William Prescott came through on every promise. The Cumberland County Infrastructure Fund launched a recovery grant for small businesses damaged by HOA corruption. Red Pine was first in line. Insurance covered part of the loss. Brenda's seized. Assets helped more. But what mattered most? People showed up. Olivia Walker, once just my neighbor, became my business partner. She handled bookings, outreach, and press. Harper Whitmore, Brenda's daughter, started a new life with her aunt in Nashville. But every weekend she drove back to Red Pine, bringing cookies for the crews, helping clean up, and just being there. I quietly arranged for our new Red Pine Foundation to sponsor her tuition at Vanderbilt. "You didn't have to do that," she said when she found out. "I did," I replied, "because you did what your mother never could. You told the truth." Even Terry Beck, now disgraced but free under a plea deal, rolled up his sleeves and started showing up every Saturday, helping coordinate volunteers and clearing debris. "I should have stood up to her years ago," he muttered, hauling a wheelbarrow full of rubble. "You're doing it now," I said. That was enough. And slowly, Red Pine rose again. The new cabins were built with fire-resistant materials, but preserved the rustic charm my grandfather had loved. 12 cabins became 20. We added a nature center, hiking trails, and even a memorial lodge built atop the footprint of the original structure, the one that had burned in the second fire. Inside, we placed photographs, letters, and even a salvaged wood beam, engraved with my grandfather's favorite saying, "You don't build land, you build a legacy." In the spring, the Tennessee wildflowers bloomed earlier than usual. Locals said it was the warmest season in 2 decades. I said it was a new start. On opening weekend, Red Pine welcomed back its first guests, families, veterans, travelers. The air buzzed with laughter again. One of the guests, a man in his 60s, looked at the newly finished main lodge and said, "Looks like it's always been here." I smiled. "It always will be." Later that evening, after the guests had turned in and the last cabin light flickered out across the lake, I walked the gravel path to the memorial lodge. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and sat quietly in the corner. From my coat pocket, I pulled out the letter my grandfather had written years ago, the one we'd found in a soot-stained lockbox beneath the ruins. His handwriting, faded but firm, still made my chest tighten. "If you're reading this, then you've been tested, and if you've made it this far, then you know the truth. That what's built with heart can't be burned. It may fall, but it never disappears. Because what matters, character, honor, grit, those things are fireproof. Build something that outlasts you, son." I folded it slowly and returned it to my chest pocket. Through the window, I saw the reflection of the lake. Still, calm, and mine. On the hill across the lake sat the new community building for Hickory Ridge. A real one this time, run by a new HOA board that believed in transparency, term limits, and public audits. Brenda's kingdom of fear was gone. In its place stood something closer to democracy, and across the county courthouse, her name sat in a federal file, stamped, "Guilty on all counts, 5 years, restitution," and a legacy that would never wash clean. But this story, it isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. Brenda tried to burn me out of my own land. She tried to destroy my name, my livelihood, and my family's memory. But in doing so, she handed me the very tools I needed to build something better. From the flames, I forged a future. And now, when people ask me what Red Pine stands for, I just tell them, It stands for every person who's ever been bullied by a board, harassed by a rule, or threatened for saying no. Because at the end of the day, a man who stands on his land with nothing left but his word is the most dangerous man of all. Red Pine was back, not just rebuilt, not just restored, reborn. But the fire that nearly destroyed it did more than scorch wood and memories. It ignited something bigger than me, something louder than Brenda Whitmore's lies. It woke up the entire town of Beaver Creek and beyond. 3 weeks after our reopening weekend, I got a call from a reporter at the Tennessee Ledger, the state's oldest paper. "Mr. Barrett," she said, "do you have time for a story?" I almost laughed. "I think we've got enough material to fill a whole damn novel," I replied. The article that followed hit the front page. HOA president burned down resort, didn't know the owner controlled her funding. It spread like wildfire. National blogs picked it up. Then came podcasts, then daytime talk shows. And suddenly, I wasn't just the guy rebuilding his cabins. I was the guy who took down an HOA tyrant. Emails flooded in, hundreds. Messages from small-town folks, veterans, retirees, families, all sharing stories of being bullied by HOA boards just like Brenda's. They fined me $300 for a garden gnome. I had to sell my house after they threatened to sue over my mailbox. They voted to remove my wheelchair ramp while I was in rehab. Some of these people, they were still in the fight. Others had already lost everything. But now, they had a reason to speak up. And they weren't just looking for sympathy, they were looking for justice. William and I met in a conference room downtown. He set down a thick folder in front of me, dozens of new funding applications from HOAs across the state. "After what happened with Brenda," he said, "we're revamping everything. Every HOA now gets a compliance audit, no exceptions." I flipped through the list. Some names looked familiar, neighbors of Hickory Ridge. Others were out in counties I'd never set foot in. But they all had one thing in common. People like me were watching now. "I want to help run the reviews," I told him. "I know what signs to look for," William smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Meanwhile, Red Pine had become more than a resort. It was turning into a symbol. We hosted weekend retreats for HOA victims. Yes, that's a real phrase now. People came from Georgia, Alabama, even Texas. Some were elderly couples. Some were younger families. All had one thing in common. They'd been pushed, pressured, or punished by people abusing a system meant to serve them. So we started the Red Pine Fellowship, a nonprofit funded by a share of our profits and donations from supporters across the country. Its mission was simple: help people fight back, legally, publicly, loudly. Then came Brenda's trial. Federal court, 5 felony counts: embezzlement, wire fraud, arson, criminal conspiracy, obstruction of justice. She showed up the first day still trying to play the queen. Full makeup, loud jewelry, and a suit that probably cost more than a month's wages for my old groundskeeper. But by the time Harper took the stand and played that audio recording of Brenda ordering the fires, she wasn't a queen anymore. Just another tyrant caught in her own trap. The courtroom was packed with residents of Hickory Ridge, many of whom had once feared her. Now they sat with folded arms, angry silence, and tearful eyes. Because now they saw the damage up close, the stolen money, the destroyed lives, the fear she ruled with. Harper's testimony was the hardest to watch. Her voice trembled, hands fidgeting in her lap, but she never broke. She told me people were just pawns, she said. She said they didn't matter, that if they resisted, you burned them down, figuratively or literally. The judge took no time. Guilty. On all counts. 5 years in federal prison. $700,000 in restitution, half to the HOA, half to Red Pine. And a permanent ban from serving on any civic or nonprofit board for life. After the verdict, I stepped outside into the Tennessee sun. Reporters shoved microphones in my face. "What do you want people to take from this, Mr. Barrett?" I looked at the cameras and said the only thing that mattered. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. No one is above the law, not even a HOA president in a purple SUV. That quote made the headlines. A month later, something unexpected happened. The Department of Housing and Urban Development reached out. They wanted help designing a statewide oversight program for HOA governance. They asked me to consult. Me, a cabin owner. Funny how things work. And through it all, Red Pine kept growing. We added an outdoor amphitheater for community events, partnered with local schools for environmental education, launched a scholarship in my grandfather's name. One Saturday morning, as I watched volunteers plant native wildflowers along the walking trail, I heard laughter. Kids, families, life. Olivia walked up, clipboard in hand. "You really did it, Logan," she said. "You turned ashes into something beautiful." I looked around. "No," I replied. "We did." That night, I sat by the fire pit alone. The stars were out, bright, unbothered, eternal. I pulled out my grandfather's letter again, the edges now soft with time. "Build something that lasts, son," I whispered back to the sky. I did, Grandpa, and I made damn sure they could never burn it down again. I never wanted to be a hero. I never asked for a spotlight, a microphone, or a movement. All I wanted was to protect a piece of land my grandfather built with his bare hands and to make sure no one could ever torch it again. But sometimes, when you fight one bully loud enough, the rest of the neighborhood hears you, and when they hear you, they come knocking. A month after Brenda's sentencing, I started getting invitations. At first, they came from small towns, local homeowner groups, housing forums, county meetings. Then came the TV interviews. Then the calls from out-of-state legal firms, HOA reform committees, even veterans groups. Apparently, word had spread. There was a guy in Tennessee who stood up to a corrupt HOA, beat them at their own game, and came out stronger for it. And suddenly, people wanted my story to be their blueprint. I remember the moment it hit me, how big this had become. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a paycheck. It was a handwritten letter, mailed to Red Pine, with no return address. Inside was a photo of an elderly couple standing in front of their small blue home, holding hands. The note read, "They tried to take our house after 42 years because of a cracked driveway. We saw your story and fought back. We won. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. The Holcombs, Sacramento, CA." I held that letter for 10 minutes without saying a word. Then I folded it, placed it in a box next to my grandfather's photo, and sat down to write my first national op-ed. The piece ran in The Atlantic, under the title, "Homeowners Associations Were Never Supposed to Be Kingdoms." I didn't mince words. I wrote about how power thrives in silence, how people like Brenda use fear and bureaucracy like weapons, and how most victims don't even know their rights until it's too late. Told them, you're not alone. The law is on your side, and when it's not, make new law. It went viral in under 48 hours. The email inbox for the Red Pine Fellowship nearly crashed. Within weeks, our fellowship had expanded into a nationwide network. We built an online platform, offering legal resources, pro bono attorney referrals, public exposure tools, because sometimes a little spotlight goes a long way. A wall of shame database tracking repeat offender HOAC didn't run it alone. I didn't want to. So I brought in former HOA whistleblowers, attorneys, even ex-inspectors who'd walked away from corrupt contracts. And together we created something bigger than Red Pine. We created a fire break, a line people could stand behind when the HOA tried to burn them down, but not everyone was happy about it. Got threats, some anonymous, some not. One HOA in Arizona called me a menace to community order. Another tried to sue me for inciting unrest. A third offered me $250,000 to focus on rebuilding, not politics. I didn't reply. I didn't back down. Instead, I doubled down. I flew to Washington, D.C. for the first time in my life, at the invitation of Senator Grace Holloway, a longtime advocate for property rights. She was introducing a new bill, the ITE Fair Property Act. It would mandate financial transparency for all. HOAs prohibit unilateral enforcement actions outside jurisdiction. Criminalize the misuse of HOA funds without community vote. Require third-party audits every 2 years. She wanted me to testify before Congress. I stood at the podium, under lights brighter than I liked, and told my story, not the Hollywood version, not the viral version, but the truth. They burned my grandfather's resort to the ground. They tried to frame me, bankrupt me, break me, but I'm still standing, and I'm not the only one. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came applause. Not for me, for the idea that no one should be powerless on their own property. After that, everything moved fast. The bill advanced. Slowly, but surely, local governments began reviewing HOA. Charters communities started showing up to meetings. People who had once whispered in fear were now speaking up, with evidence, with allies, with fire in their voices. It wasn't just a movement, it was a reckoning. Back at Red Pine, life was simple again. Olivia kept the resort running like a well-oiled machine. Our guests, mostly families, veterans, and now a steady flow of HOA refugees, folks escaping the madness for a weekend of peace. One of them, a single mom from Michigan, hugged me after checking out. "You made me feel like I could fight back," she whispered. I never knew how to respond to that. I still don't, so I just nodded and meant it. One evening, I walked the rebuilt trail behind the nature center, newly renamed Legacy Loop, in honor of the letter my grandfather left me. At the crest of the hill, I stopped and looked out. Across the lake, the moon shimmered on the water. In the distance, you could barely make out the lights of Hickory Ridge, under new leadership, new policies, new hope. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. And that mattered. As I stood there, the phone buzzed with new messages, new headlines, new stories. I smiled because I knew this didn't end at Red Pine. It started here. That night, I sat alone on the newly built wooden porch of Red Pine, gazing out over the moonlit lake, a mug of Olivia's strong black coffee in hand. In the distance, the lights from the newly restored cabins shimmered like fallen, stars scattered across the land. Laughter echoed from a group of families gathered around a campfire. Kids ran, adults chatted. It was peace, deceptively simple, but I knew the cost. Fire, sweat, and standing alone in storms few dared to. Red Pine wasn't rebuilt with just concrete and timber. It was rebuilt with belief. I remembered Brenda that day, cuffed and led out of court, her face pale, her eyes locked on me like I was a traitor. No, Brenda, I didn't betray anyone. I just refused to kneel before people who think power makes them immune to consequences. 6 months after the Fair Property Act passed, I got a letter from a family in Utah. Because of your story, our HOA was forced to hold new elections, open the books, and cancel every unjust fine they threw at us. We're not rich, but for the first time in years, we feel like we have a voice. I folded the letter and placed it inside the wooden box next to my grandfather's photo. The box is full now, not with money, but with meaning. Harper still visits Red Pine from time to time, bringing homemade pastries and updates from her university. She's studying social work. "I want to help people like my mom, or worse," she once said, her gaze distant. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing something she never could, making it right. Olivia isn't just my partner anymore. She's the heart of Red Pine. She manages every staff member, every reservation, every workshop for folks pushed to the edge by HOAs. When someone needs a place to start over, she's the first to open the door. And me? I took a step back, so Red Pine could grow beyond just Logan's place into a true community. One day, a group of high schoolers came for a field trip on conservation. I led them down the Legacy Loop, a trail named after my grandfather's last letter. At the trail's end, I pointed to an old brass plaque set into the ground where the first cabin once stood, etched into it. "They can burn the house, but they can't burn what's good." I turned to the kids and said, "The man who built this place, my grandfather, once taught me, some things don't burn. Not because they can't catch fire, but because they live in how we rise again, after everything else turns to ash." That night, I sat once more at the old wooden table beneath the tall pines, the same spot where I first read Grandpa's final letter. A glass of aged bourbon in hand, stars overhead, and a question I'd long avoided in my heart. Did I win? The Chiyu? Answer is no, because this was never about winning or losing. It was about holding your ground when everything around you starts to rot. About keeping a promise to family, keeping dignity in a game built on pressure, and keeping kindness, even when it costs you everything. Red Pine was once just a rustic lakeside retreat. Now it's a symbol, not because of me, but because of every person who came here, wrote a letter, or stood up after being crushed by an HOA fine, threatened over a fence, a paint color, or a flower pot. I didn't lead this movement. I was just the first to stand. While the smoke was still rising, a shooting star streaked across the sky. I closed my eyes. Didn't wish for wealth or power or revenge. I simply whispered, "May others find their fire, and when they're burned, may they know how to relight it." Because in the end, all they burned was wood. But will, when forged in fire, shines brighter than any spotlight they build to intimidate. I didn't rebuild that cabin for revenge. I rebuilt it to remind them, and anyone living in fear of a cold HOA letter, that no one has the right to make you feel afraid on your own land. I'm Logan Barrett, and if they thought they could turn me to ash, they forgot one thing. Once you've walked through fire, you don't fear any flame.